Hey Cake Chums, and welcome back to another video. And let me say a special welcome to our mini Cake Chums who are joining us for the first time. Welcome to the Mr. Baker's Cakes kitchen, guys. As we all know, the schools are closed at the moment, other than for the children of essential key workers, which means that lots of you are having to do your learning at home. So I thought it might be fun to do a little bit of baking. Most of you know that I'm also a primary school teacher, and those of you that have found your way here because you know me as a teacher, you probably know that I'm also a bit of a baker as well. So I thought, what better way to help you with your learning at home than to combine my two passions together and show you how to do some baking. Let's get to the video. And one of the most fun things to bake at home with your family has to be cupcakes. Who doesn't love a cupcake? So I thought for the first episode of Mr. Baker's Cake School, I'd show you how I make my super delicious vanilla cupcakes that you can then adapt and change and play around with as much as you'd like. Before we get started, I'm going to go through all of the ingredients that you're going to need to join in with our baking today, but don't panic if you haven't got all of the ingredients just yet. Like you, I have struggled to get hold of some of the essentials that I need to do my baking, and if you find that you've got something missing, then feel free to head down to the comments and let me know what it is you can't get hold of, and I might be able to point you in the direction of another recipe that you can try instead. I don't want crowds of parents up and down the country getting mad at me because you've made a mess. So we're going to pop on an apron, and if you're wearing something with long sleeves, make sure that you've rolled those up. Now if you're lucky enough to have an electric mixer at home, then by all means you can use that to help you with your baking today. So I've got one that looks like this, or you might have one that looks like this. If you do, you can use either of those to help you with your cupcakes today. But because I want everyone to be able to join in with my first lesson, we're going to do things the old-fashioned way, which means you will need a bowl and a wooden spoon. You're also going to need some weighing scales. So whether you have a digital set like I do here, or a more traditional one like this one over here, either will work absolutely fine. So grab those, and then finally, it's time for some ingredients. Now one of the things lots of professional chefs like to do when they're cooking or baking is get all of their ingredients ready first. They actually have a name for it, mise en place. And that basically means just having everything organised and ready before you get started. So we're going to do that too. To make my super tasty cupcakes, you are going to need 175 grams of butter. I'm using salted butter today, purely because that's all I could get hold of. But if you decide to use unsalted butter, you can just add a little sprinkle of salt to your mixture. You're also going to need 175 grams of caster sugar, 175 grams of flour, and 3 free-range eggs. Now if you have a more traditional set of scales like these ones here, then you'll notice that the marked divisions go up in intervals of 200 grams. Because we're weighing out 175 grams, you'll notice that we would end up somewhere towards the 200 mark. It's quite tricky to use scales like this when you're using numbers like 175, so you might need an adult to help you with this part. If you have a set of digital scales like these ones, you'll find that it's a lot simpler to read because it just pops up the number here with the small unit of measure in the corner. So I've set my scales up for grams, and this is what I'm going to be using to weigh out my ingredients today. If you have access to some digital scales, you might find this a lot easier. So I'm going to start by placing my first bowl on the scales and then press the button to make it go back to 0 again. And into this bowl, I'm going to pop in 175 grams of my butter. Now in a normal block of butter you get 250 grams, so if you're particularly whizzy at maths you might be able to work out how much we'll have left over at the end. To make the butter easier to work with, I'm going to cut it up into smaller pieces so that when I come to mix it in a moment it won't be quite so hard. So I'm placing it into the scales and I'm watching those numbers creep up, and I'm waiting for it to get to 175 grams. If you have a look, we're actually at about 67 at the moment, so I've got quite a way to go. Oh, I've gone a bit over, so I'm just going to take a little bit back out. And that's 175 grams. I'm going to pop the rest of this butter to one side because we'll use this again later on. And then we're going to take the butter off and put it to one side and do exactly the same thing with the sugar. So I'm going to put a new bowl on the scales, press the button that takes it back to 0, and then weigh out my sugar. You can do this with a spoon or you can pour it, whichever one you find easiest. If you accidentally put a little bit too much in, don't worry. Just use a spoon and scoop the extra back into a bag to use next time. Again, we're going to put the sugar to one side and we're going to weigh out our flour. But this time, we're going to put our bowl on the scale and we're going to put a sieve on top. Then we press 0 on the scale. The reason why is because we don't want the flour to be too lumpy when we're baking, otherwise we might end up with lumps of flour in our cupcakes, which wouldn't taste very nice. It also helps us get lots of air into the mix as well, which will make really nice, tasty, fluffy cupcakes, and that's what we're after. So again, just spoon or pour 175 grams of flour into your sieve. And then we're just going to shake the sieve down into the bowl to give us a nice, light, loose flour. This bit can get quite messy, but don't worry. That's part of the fun. And then once we've done that, that's all of the weighing that we have to do. So you can give your scales a wipe down and pop them back in the cupboard for next time. The last ingredient we need to get ready are our eggs, and this recipe uses 3 eggs. Now I've got medium eggs here today, but I have used large ones as well. It doesn't matter too much. So we're going to crack 3 of our eggs into our bowl. Being nice and careful not to get any of the shell in there as well. If you do end up getting a little bit of shell in there, take half of the shell and you can use that to help you scoop up the piece that managed to escape its way into the bowl. Once you've got your 3 eggs in there, grab a fork and give it a stir. And there you have it, that's our 4 main ingredients: butter, sugar, eggs and flour. And once you have all of your ingredients ready, it's time to get cracking on making your cupcakes. We're going to start by putting all of our butter into our big mixing bowl. And the next bit is probably the trickiest part of the whole thing, because we want to beat this butter out until it's really loose and light and soft. You should hopefully find it goes a little bit paler in colour as well. So grab your wooden spoon and get mixing. If you find your arm gets tired while you're doing this bit, feel free to get an adult to help you. And then when your butter has started to loosen up a little bit, it's time to add in your sugar and keep mixing. When your mixture is starting to look quite creamy, like this, then we can start adding in some of our egg mixture. We're not going to do it all in one go. We're going to add a little bit at a time and then mix that in until it becomes quite smooth. If you find that it's starting to go a bit gritty, that means that your mixture is splitting, which means we need to add a little bit of our flour in to kind of bring it all back together again. So I'll start with a little bit of my egg. And then give it a jolly good stir. If you're finding it tricky mixing with a wooden spoon, you can always try asking your adult if they have a whisk instead. That's a special tool that looks like this. I'm going to add in a bit more of my egg, or apparently all of my egg. So can you see it's starting to look a little bit lumpy, and that's called curdling. If that happens, don't worry, just add in a spoon or 2 of your flour and that will bring it back together. And then finally, we're going to add in the rest of our flour and I'm going to go back to the wooden spoon to mix it in. The reason why we don't mix this with the whisk is because it's very easy to overbeat your ingredients. Flour's the same thing that makes bread, and we don't want our cake to be quite heavy and dense and bready. We want them to be all light and fluffy. So if we mix the flour in too much, it can make our cakes more like bread. So as soon as you can't see any more flour, it's mixed enough. Now at the moment, what we've made here is a perfectly normal cake batter, and we could use this to bake cupcakes right now. But one thing I like to do before I put them in the oven is add some flavour. I'm going to be using vanilla flavouring today, but you could also try using a lemon extract, you could try using coffee extract, strawberry. The possibilities really are endless. Have a look in the cupboard and see what you already have. For this much mixture, we're going to need 1 teaspoon. I have a special set of measuring spoons here, which includes one for a teaspoon. You could also just use a normal teaspoon if that's what you have. So that goes into the bowl, and then we give it one more stir to make sure it's all mixed through. And this is what my mixture looks like. Hopefully if you're making along with me at home, yours looks something like this as well. When your mixture's ready, we're going to line a muffin tin, which looks like this, with our cupcake cases. And I like to use quite deep cupcake cases because I like big cupcakes. Pop these away for next time. And then finally we just need to divide our mixture into these 12 cases. I like to use an ice cream scoop to do that, but you can use a normal spoon if that's all you have. And then once your mixture is shared out equally between your 12 cupcake cases, you're going to need to ask an adult to put them in the oven for you at about 170 degrees fan for about 25 minutes. Now to check that they're cooked after 25 minutes, my favourite thing to do is to put my ear down near to the tray and listen to hear if I can hear a bubbling noise. That's called singing. If your cupcakes are still singing when your adult checks them for you, then it probably means that they need a couple more minutes. But don't leave them for long, because we don't want them to get burnt. Now while your cupcakes are in the oven, this is the perfect time to have a bit of a tidy up before we move on to the next stage. So grab a cloth or a sponge and get wiping. Now to decorate our cupcakes, there are lots of different things we can use. You could either make some water icing, which you do by mixing some icing sugar with a little bit of water until it's nice and runny. And then you can either pour that onto your cupcakes or hold them in your hand and dip them in upside down. My favourite way to top cupcakes though is to make some buttercream, which you might have heard people call frosting before. It's really easy to make, and it starts just like how we made our cupcakes, by mixing the butter until it's nice and smooth, and then we're going to add in some icing sugar. Now for this one, I am going to use my electric hand whisk just because it will make things a lot quicker. But again, if you don't have one, that's fine. You can just use your normal wooden spoon or your whisk, and it will give you the same results. So I'm going to start by chopping up another 250 gram packet of butter, and I'm going to put the whole thing into another clean bowl. And then just like we did before, we're either going to use a whisk, an electric hand mixer like mine, or a stand mixer like that one to mix the butter up until it's nice and smooth. Now I'm going to scrape the butter down the side of the bowl, and then I'm going to add in 500 grams of my icing sugar. Yes, I put those scales away too early. Now just like with the flour, I'm giving my icing sugar a sift through my sieve just to make sure we don't have any lumps in it at all. And I'll warn you now, icing sugar is messy. It goes everywhere. That's why we wore the apron. Now I'm going to start mixing this on a really slow speed, because otherwise you'll see it will go whoosh up in the air, and we don't want that. So be very, very careful. And then once it's started to mix together, we're going to add in some liquid in the form of more flavouring. Just like before, I'm using my vanilla flavouring, and this one I'm going to put in a tablespoon. I'm now in a cloud of icing sugar. If you find that your mixture is still a little bit stiff, you can use a little bit of water to help thin it down slightly. That will make it easier to mix as well. You can also add some food colouring at this point if you want to make your icing a bit more exciting. I think I'm going to do blue to match my apron. And of course, because you've done all the hard work, it's only fair that you get to taste it. Delicious. So we're just going to give that a quick scrape down the sides of the bowl, and then we can cover it over until we're ready to decorate our cupcakes. I'm just going to go and check on mine. And then once your cupcakes have stopped making that singing noise that I was talking about, it's time to take them out of the oven. Get an adult to help you do this, as they will be very, very hot. I'd also get your adult to do the next bit as well, which is transferring them onto a cooling rack, where we're going to leave them to cool completely before we decorate them. So once your adult has transferred them onto a cooling rack for you, it's now the perfect time to go and do the washing up, by which time, hopefully the cakes will be cool enough for us to decorate them. So I'm going to wash up all of this, and I'll see you in a little while.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
So hopefully you've managed to wait long enough that your cupcakes have cooled down and are now cool enough for you to be able to hold them. When it comes to decorating, there are lots and lots of different options, as I've already said, but today we're going to be using the buttercream that we made earlier on, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can put it on your cupcakes. So I'm just going to give it a quick stir to get it nice and soft again. Nearly forgot to put this back on. Now, if you don't have any fancy kind of baking stuff at all, so no piping bags and piping tips and things like that, you can use something as simple as a knife and just take some of your buttercream on there and then just spread it on top of your cupcake. So I've just taken some of that buttercream onto my knife, and all I'm doing, I hold it nice and in this camera view, I'm just pulling it down towards the edges where it meets that paper. That's one way you can do it. My absolute favourite way to finish my cupcakes though is to use a piping bag and a piping tip. Now, I'm sure you'll have seen these before, but this is a piping bag and this is a piping tip. And that's used when you want to do some nice swirly patterns on the top of your cupcake. So I'm going to cut the end off my piping bag, and then I'm going to take my piping tip, push it down right inside through that hole, and then load a nice big dollop of my buttercream inside the bag. And there are a couple of different ways you can use your piping bag to do your buttercream. My favourite way is to start in the middle, start piping, and then do a circle around the outside of that central bit. And that gives you this cool, almost like a rose effect. You can also do the opposite, which is where you start at the outside and then go around until you get to the middle like that. But why not experiment with different types of piping tips and different patterns and see what sort of effects you can create. But for now, I'm going to finish piping these, and then I'll show you a really quick and simple way to decorate them. So to finish off our cupcakes today, I've just grabbed a jar of my favourite sprinkles, which are all different colours and shapes and textures, and they look absolutely brilliant on any type of cupcake. So I'm just going to grab a little handful and sprinkle it on top of each of these. And the great thing is, any that miss and end up on the worktop, as long as you've been making sure you've cleaned up as you go, you can just swipe them back into your hands and use them again. So there you go, ladies and gents. That is how to create your own super simple but super delicious cupcakes. And I don't know about you, but I think we've waited long enough to dive straight into one of these. Cheers. I do hope you enjoyed the first episode of Mr. Baker's Cake School, and if you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. As I explained last week, I'm going to be uploading a new episode every single week while the schools are closed, so if there's any particular things you would like me to cover in an upcoming video, be sure to head down to the comments and let me know. If you haven't already subscribed to Mr. Baker's Cakes here on YouTube, you can do that by hitting the red button down there on the right, and if you click the bell icon too, that will make sure you get a notification every time I upload a new video. In the meantime, do make sure you are looking after yourselves out there, keep yourself safe, and I'll see you very soon. Take care.